Hello and welcome. I'm Anna Triponel and I'm joined by Malin Helgesen today. You guessed it, we have our suits on. We are here for the Welcome to Our Be Human Rights Confident for Lawyers series, and today we are chatting about responsible contracts. In a nutshell, we are talking about the art of negotiating contracts and how we can make them more responsible. Responsible being looking at the risks to people that we are trying to manage through that contract, and doing a better job at making that contract work for the people as well as for the business. Let's kick off. Marlin, what is the reality when we are a lawyer negotiating a contract?
You as a lawyer have been trained for many years probably to look after your client's interest, in the sense that it's about getting as much as possible for as little as possible. Looking out for your own cost and responsibility, and more academically just dividing risk. You have the risk for that, I have the risk for this. Your responsibility is that, I do my thing over here.
Yeah.
So that's one. The other one is of course speed. Very often contracts need to be negotiated very quickly. And you have that dynamic that you really want to get to signing, and all bumps in the road, you really don't like them. The third one is often confidentiality. It's a confidential contract, so you want to bring in as few people as possible. And it's that dynamic of thinking that, well, I'm not going to bring in experts unless I really have to.
I really remember that reality and sort of that adrenaline that we have sort of as lawyers, like, I am getting the best deal possible for my client. And it is this feeling of, it's not win-win. It's like who's going to win and who's going to lose. But of course, if you can create win-win, but that's quite rare, isn't it? It is quite...
It's like a bonus, added bonus. Yes.
And that confidentiality point is so important, because I remember when we were talking about bringing human rights risks into M&A, for instance, and we were reading, well, what about you pick up the phone, you talk to all these people, you go on the ground, it's like, ain't going to happen. But there are ways, but it's not sort of the natural way that we would think about if we think about human rights due diligence pure, is it? I remember the contracts I was working on, it pages and pages and pages of text, and thinking, oh my gosh, for the other side to read this. Often, I was representing the more sort of sophisticated party, and then they were sort of a bit, smaller company and not as many resources, and it was like, voila, over to you. And if you're on the other side, what does it feel like?
Yes, Anna, that could be quite a different dynamic and situation, right? Because when you are a supplier in a different country who are competing for your business, and you are much smaller, and the one things that your customer wants is price and time. So you get squeezed on time and price. And that's because the other party wants to win, right? So they want to have fast delivery for as little as possible. So very often you feel very squeezed, so you create this dynamic, and we know this, that on the ground, essentially what you are then creating is a race to the bottom. Who can compete with the lowest prices, i.e. wages.
Yes. There's this real imbalance of power happening, with often sort of the buyer having more of the power. They've got the business, they've got the dollars, they've got the orders they want to fill. And then you've got the supplier or the other partners. So that we want to be part of this global value chain, we want to be part of this business. We will do what we can to make it work. And so that imbalance of power then transfers over to the workers.
Yes, and not even the suppliers' workers, but the sub suppliers. And then also there are quite big challenges now to fix for customers want to be able to show a clean supply chain, both in terms of environment, climate, and wages, etc. And it's so easy then with this division of responsibilities that you just push that to your supplier. But of course, how can you ask one supplier to fix systemic issues? And it's that lack of understanding of what it's like.
Exactly, of the issues you're trying to tackle through the contract in the first place. Of course it feels comfortable. Of course you want to be like, I take on this responsibility, and then I push it back over through my contract. Great. But that is really a fundamental misunderstanding of what we are trying to manage through the contract in the first place.
Yes, and essentially it's just not very helpful.
Right.
And then the third thing is, of course, Anna, as we know, the research, all the research in the world, and also experience showing that the way people often want to control then their contractual partner is through quick audits with checklists, and we know that also they are very often not equipped to find the really systemic issues and the really difficult issues like discrimination, gender-based violence, the chronic overtime that are not paid, etc., etc.
Right.
So you end up with a clean audit very often that is not, in fact, a proof of a clean supply chain. And that's our point, and I think, because then by doing this system, you're exactly not, it's not a resilient business model.
Right.
Because when all the facts on the ground, which are going to come out, and you know that, all of you, that all of a sudden a company's human rights issues in the supply chain is out in media, and it's a huge business risk.
Yeah.
So it's that short-term feeling of I
won. Yes. Sort of there's the
and then you come back and it's like, no, I didn't.
In fact, not at all. Like the legal, what we know, the legal tools that we have at our disposal to manage the risk is representations of warranties and indemnities and all of these things, these termination rights and the right to audit unexpectedly and all this stuff. All of these like tools in our toolkit that we want to bring out to manage this risk are actually doing the opposite, are actually undermining how we can manage the risk. One example I remember, I was out working in China, and in the contracts it was, you certify, right, that you don't have excessive working hours. Okay, so they all certified this, signed the contract, wanted the business. Then the company took that out and said, look, we know this is probably happening. Can you just tell us, is it happening? 95% of the suppliers said, yes, we have it. Of course we have it, because this is the reality. So suddenly they know that information and then they can act on it. So what is the use of the contract? I just want to give an example that I loved about Tony Chocolonely's employment contracts, where the company is basically saying the contract signing should be the most exciting part, because you're starting a new relationship, that we are together, both benefiting from this relationship. And essentially that's what we're saying, is how can we have the contract be more of a win-win? What does it look like?
Yes, I think it's important for lawyers to understand that the contract is part of the company's human rights due diligence. Yeah. And of course, just splitting responsibilities that are completely unreasonable on one side and then you sit back on the other, it's not proper human rights due diligence. Right. So just there, in a regulatory environment, you will shoot yourself in the foot. Right. And so I think it's very important first, as always, Anna, knowledge. But since many lawyers, they have never been on the ground, or maybe not even read a country report on human rights context. Yeah. You don't know the context, and therefore it's easier to think that, oh, this is great. Yeah. The guys down there, they don't need as much money, for instance, or salary is probably really high for them anyway. The other one is, of course, to dare to leave that what we've been trained to do, division of responsibilities, division of risk, behind, and look for that collaborative approach. Yes. Okay, so we need to have living wage. What do I bring to the table? What do I bring to the table? Yes. What do you bring to the table? Yes. And what does it look like? I love that, Marnie. It's really feel the discomfort of not doing it the traditional way, but do it anyway. Yes. Given what we know we are tackling. Yes. And I would lay on to that. It's sort of, let's be honest with ourselves. Are we trying to tackle the legal liability for the company? Are we trying to tackle the human rights impacts that we're connected to? Are we trying to do both together? Let's just be honest here about what we are doing in the use of this contract. And then, as you say, there are ways we can get to that partnership, that win-win, but thinking more creatively about that. And then bringing in your specialists, right? You've got human rights and sustainability specialists who know. There was a project I did for a company. We interviewed all these lawyers in-house and say, we looked at the contracts and we basically landed on exactly your point, Malin. Those lawyers that had been on the ground, who had more just understanding of what was actually going on underpinning this contract, were able to be more mindful about, if I ask for that, well, will it actually push it under the radar and we don't know about it, or will it actually damage my human rights due diligence? Yes. And so if you have that understanding, it can really help you as a lawyer. And that brings us to our third top tip. It's engaging with people beyond the legal compartment and beyond your external law firm.
Yeah.
And if you are a lawyer and never spoken with anyone in your sustainability team, ask them, or even ask a business person who has been on the ground, because they know.
Right.
And have a coffee tomorrow. And likewise, if you are a sustainability person, looking at this video, have you talked with your legal colleagues? Invite them for a coffee and show them what it's like.
It's that marriage of sort of the skill sets and understanding and knowledge, and of course as lawyers it's amazing, you know, what we can do as lawyers, sort of having all of those tools and knowing to translate that into contract and being able to navigate that legal risk. And then you have other people who are knowing about all those human rights impacts, and that's what you're trying to navigate with the contract. So how do you bring that together to have that lawyering take place in a way that is future fit for the future?
Definitely, because what we're talking about here, Anna, is of course was also good for business.
Good for business.
And it's the business resilience we want, right? That's good for both business and for people.
And for people.
And
for people. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good end of day.
Bye-bye.